On Texas Public Radio, I'm David Martin Davies. We're continuing our discussion about the executive order signed by Donald Trump this week that would require folks to have some sort of proof of citizenship in order to register to vote and other items. And now we're joined by Angelica Razo. She is with Mi Familia Vota, a National Deputy Director of Campaigns and Programs. And Angelica, welcome to The Source.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what are your concerns about this executive order that Trump has signed and about this SAVE Act that's trying to be passed by the Republican Congress?
Ooh, I mean, this is a big one, right? It directly impacts the work that we do as Mi Familia Vota in regards to increasing civic engagement in the Latino community, everything from voter registration to motivating voters to come out and vote, and everything in between, right? All the voter education that goes to make that happen. And then we just see this as the most recent attempt to silence our voters and seize power in a very undemocratic way. And so for us, it's deeply concerning, the impact it's going to have, and really looking at like, how is this going to impact the work that we are doing as an organization, the conversations we're having with our voters, and is it going to disrupt the progress we've been making over the past decade, 2 decades, and increasing voter education in our community?
Our phone lines are open. If you've got a question or a comment, would you have no problem being able to prove that you're a U.S. citizen if you had to when you go vote or register to vote, or do you see this as an unnecessary barrier for political gain? The number is 833-877-8255, 833-TPR-TALK. So, Angelica, do you think this is politics?
Absolutely. Again, it's the most recent attempt we're seeing to really take back power from our voters. We're an organization that does voter registration year-round. We are, 100% staying in compliance as an organization and understand what we have to do as an organization to make sure we're educating our voters, and then what role our local election offices play, right? There's already checks and balances to make sure that the voters that are getting registered to vote are U.S. citizens, right? So it goes everything from the conversations we have with our voters to ensure that they are only registering to vote if they are U.S. citizens, all the way to what is happening behind the scenes in our county election offices to 100% verify that.
And we spoke about it in the last segment, but there's concerns that the bill would say your name when you go register to vote has to match your birth certificate. And as we know, there's the practice that many women will change their names when they get married or when they get divorced. All sorts of things happen in people's names, that this would prevent them from being able to vote. Do you see that as something that is real, or is that just scare tactics? Is that something that needs to be talked about?
Absolutely, and I think I would say there's another layer of concern for our community in particular, where we have folks that in their home countries, particularly in Latin America, there's still a culture of having 2 last names, right? That in different countries recognized fully by their governments as 2 last names. And here in the United States, we just don't really have a system for recognizing that, right? And so we have had instances where women have registered to vote, have then become citizens, and sometimes their first last name gets dropped off, gets categorized under their middle name, right? Like, we are already seeing instances of that in the current system that we have. Now, when you add another layer of it, it just creates a bigger burden on women, on folks that are changing their names. And oftentimes what we see is they are not contacted to make that correction. They are just simply knocked off the voter rolls, or our election officials are not trained to understand that in a culturally competent way, folks show up to vote, they can't be found on the voter registration rolls, they get turned away, right? Like, that's a lot of the community education that we're doing to make sure that folks are doing everything that they can proactively to make sure that they know what they need to have in order. But we need a system that understands that, like, all those factors, and is understanding of that, versus completely just blocking someone's opportunity to vote. And in an executive order like this, that's making it even harder for folks to justify their, the proof of citizenship, how they're showing up on voter rolls. And it's just, voters have lives to live, and as we make it harder, they become less and less motivated to participate in a democracy that's clearly unwelcoming to them.
And so I'm sure if this stands, there will be people who are going to go at the polls, go to vote, and then they'll find out that they can't. Um, I'm afraid those people won't be able to be counted in any way. I mean, we need to be able to recognize how frequently that is happening. Hopefully it never happens, but and that this gets knocked down by the courts before we have an election. But we got to know about these. When people are denied the right to vote, how do we track that?
It's really hard, to be honest. We have fantastic voter protection hotlines that are live during the entire election cycle, and that works really well. I will tell you from the Mi Familia Vota side in our, the conversations we're having with voters year round or as we get ready for elections, is we often hear that they have had experiences like this several cycles ago.
Yeah.
And they are now just coming along to terms where let me try again. But
Yeah.
8 years ago, I went to vote and I got blocked and I didn't know who to call. I didn't know how to report that. I felt like I was the person to blame. And that's often the sentiment that our voters for several years are carrying. And again, it takes organizations like Mi Familia Vota to do this voter education as much as we can to make sure that our voters are valued and that they know what steps they need to take should they be getting turned away from the
Right, and they
poll.
should know that they're being blocked, they're being oppressed, they're being suppressed. Let's go to Javier on the phones. And Javier, thanks for calling in. You're on the air.
Yeah, hey, how you doing, Dave? Hey, I wanted to ask Angelica if this is true or not, but I heard that Texas had stricken thousands of people off the voting rolls who, not surprisingly, happen to be Negros and Chicanos because their handwriting didn't match or something to that effect. Something didn't jive, but that they didn't even have to let the people know that, hey, we struck you from the voting rolls. She could confirm, or is that true?
Javier, thank you for your call. Appreciate it. Angelica.
Yeah, absolutely. We have seen that typically in electoral cycles when we have changes in Secretary of State or something's happening at the state level. It's not uncommon that a state like Texas reviews its voter rolls and does what we call voter purges, which means that several folks are taken off time and time and again. In the most recent voter purges we've had, that have been multiple in the past, 6 to 8 years, it is largely Latino surnames that get identified. It is largely voters in the Black community that are making the majority of these voters that are getting taken off the rolls. It is unclear what is required from the Secretary of State and county officials to notify these voters that they have been removed from the voter rolls. And so that is very concerning, right, to us, as we understand that there might be an instance where somebody needs to get taken off the voter roll. However, there's so much work that needs to go behind this to make sure that we are doing it accurately and not targeting people because of their race. And so again, that's a lot of the work that we're having to do as a community organization. Let's make sure you are registered to vote. You are still registered to vote far in advance of an electoral cycle. It shouldn't be like that. We expect government and the systems to work for our electorate, to understand that the electorate is changing and we have to meet that demand. And it is so hard in Texas to vote and to continue to stay registered. An executive order like this just adds even more burden to our Texan voters.
So do you see this as a move by the administration in order to avoid accountability from the voters?
Can you repeat that question? Sorry, I didn't hear it.
Do you see this as a move by the Trump administration and by the Republican Party to avoid accountability from voters?
I think that's a piece of it, right? Like we should be building an electoral system where our electorate, the folks that are registered to vote, are representative of our constituents, of our civilians here, and that's dynamic and that's changing. When you enact executive orders like this, and making it harder, we know you're targeting particular sets of voters. You know that it's going to be harder for some voters to make their voices heard at the ballot box, and therefore it's going to be harder for them to hold you accountable. So yes, and that does not mean that our voters don't have priorities that need to be met at a policy level. We continue to hear the issues that our community wants to see from the administration, and something like this just further stifling their voices and their power.
And so when there are cuts to programs like Social Security and national health care programs, all sorts of issues that rile up voters, but then they can't vote, I mean, you don't have to fear if the voters don't have a voice.
100%. So now we're seeing that, a political party tries to support your vote, and now you have a regime that's trying to keep you from voting. So what direction are we heading as a country? But as a democracy, we can't call this a democracy if we are not giving the fair opportunity for everyone who is eligible to cast their vote.
And it also adds to the myth that your vote doesn't count. If you think your vote doesn't count, then actually you're being voter suppressed.
Exactly. So, and I tell people, voter confusion, voter barriers, that's voter suppression.
And that's also deliberate.
100%.
All right. Well, Angelica Razo is with Mi Familia Vota, the National Deputy Director of Campaigns and Programs, talking about the recent executive order signed by Donald Trump, which would require proof of citizenship when you register to vote. Thank you so much, Angelica, for talking to us today.
Thank you so much, Dave.
And that's The Source on Tech.